Albert Einstein held me in his arms. Albert Einstein held me in his arms, although my parents didn't know it at the time. And if I knew anything, even on some vaguely molecular level, I surely wasn't talking. No one was the wiser, except for Einstein, of course, taken with my small charms. He was crazy about how I couldn't stop smiling, drooling in my carriage on a Sunday afternoon in Princeton, the town my mother loved just driving to and getting out and losing herself in, absolutely smitten. And my pedestrian father was crazy about my mother. So even if that meant another goddamn trip to Highfalutinsville, New Jersey, he'd be there without fail, forever along for the ride. The way I finally heard it, Einstein was on his knees, in a sweatshirt, rumpled chinos, and sneakers, pulling weeds. Merely being himself, my father would say later, utterly impressed. Einstein had that down to a science at 112 Mercer, the unassuming white frame house where he cultivated flowers, where he played violin, precisely in sync with his favorite recordings late into the night, where he famously met with Bertrand Russell, Kurt Gödel, and Wolfgang Pauli for philosophic forays into the schnapps, then inevitably higher mathematics. But on that one historic Sunday in the spring of my first year, Einstein himself welcomed the unrenowned likes of my mother and father. This 20th century giant picked me up with some easy peekaboo small talk in the last of the afternoon's fading light until, eventually, genius or no genius, I couldn't take it anymore. And I made a tiny grab for his wildly theoretical hair. And that was pretty much the end of our ad hoc civilization that flourished for 10 Princeton minutes. When Einstein died only 6 weeks later, every newspaper ran his picture, and all at once my father couldn't believe it. Wasn't that the gardener who couldn't get enough of the baby? It says right here, he's Einstein, the guy who revolutionized our thinking about time and space. And what was that supposed to mean to him exactly? My father wasn't Einstein, but he'd thought about time and space plenty too, deciding in his lifetime he wasn't about to get enough of either one. For years, my parents never said a word about that day, as if to remember it out loud would have been somehow unseemly, a kind of bragging they never much went in for, rather than a celebration of wonderful dumb luck Sunday driving. Like every happy accident in the history of science or in those classic, unlikely stories we can't help going back to for their mythic staying power. So now let me put it this way. Albert Einstein held me in his arms before he died. Sooner or later, we're all trying to explain our particle selves in light of our own cockeyed theories of relativity. Someone in my family, my mother or my father, maybe me, had to embellish at least some of the truth that comes, finally, here at the end. My mother's horrified that I've yanked poor Einstein's hair, and she resigns herself, sighing, "It's time to go." To prove there are no hard feelings, he says something Einsteinian like, "Yes, but what is time?" Which my father misunderstands as a question he can actually answer at that very minute, so he says, 5 o'clock. And before I know it, because I am far too young to realize much of anything, everyone's in a sudden hurry back into their uncertain futures, as if this whole thing never quite honestly happened. And in no time, it's 50 years later, and I'm the one still alive, all that's left of the story, telling myself, yes, it did. No, it didn't. No, it did.